Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a gathering place. And as you know, every third Sunday, it's Politics Talks, and we have the usual suspects joining me today, Jamar Brown and Brandon Upson, and we're going to see them in a moment. Just want to know, I'm really feeling it today. I like my history black. Hold the sugar. Shout out to the Slave Dwelling Project. All right, let's get to it right after this opening.
Hello, I'm Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard, and they're moving on something.
Brandon is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question. All right, folks, grab that popcorn, grab that wine, and let's get to it on Politics Talk. We got a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and welcome Mr. Jamar Brown. Jamar.
Hey, Marilyn, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Good. I'm on holiday vacation now. So
Yeah,
it's
very
time,
good.
after a long cycle, it's time to take some time off and rest and recharge and get back into the game in January. So
I
I'm
know.
excited.
All of us have been really busy. It's been a lot. We're going to go through a lot of stuff very
It's been
quickly
a trying
today.
year. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Both of us are actually on vacation. I'm happy that Texas is allowing you to go on vacation.
Well, I'm allowing myself.
That's what I'm talking about. All right, let's go ahead and bring Brandon Upset. Brandon is bringing the holiday African spirit.
Yes.
There we go. Happy Kwanzaa, everybody. How y'all doing?
Get ahead of the schedule,
Really
child.
good.
You know, I'm ready for it. My children, they've been learning about cultural celebrations around the world. So I'm putting a little basket together for them to take to school so they don't forget about Kwanzaa. So you're welcome, school district. You're welcome.
They're changing the history now, so you gotta be careful.
Well, congratulations. That's a really good thing to do, Brandon. So good job. Ignore the thunder in the background. My cat want to participate. All right, folks. So we're here at Politics Talk. It's been a while, so we got a list of things to go through. But let's start with the midterms. The midterms did not finish the way the Republicans expected with a huge red wave. But I also think there were warning signs for the Democrats. So that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on the midterms? And Jamar, do you want to start? You were down in mighty Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing I think that's important to recognize about the midterms is, we as Democrats beat the trends that were expected of us. In Texas, especially when the national trends would tend to lean toward losing a house or two or both, both houses of Congress. Texas would do worse. For me, I think it's important to recognize in this election, there are a lot of historic moments, both at the federal and the state levels. We have more people of color going to Congress than in the history of our country. More women who are going to Congress, especially Black women. For example, Summer Lee in Pennsylvania. Other young women of color also as well. And in Texas, we're sending two new members. We're sending an African-American woman from Dallas and a Hispanic man from Austin. And so we're excited that we have two new members of Congress that will be joining this class. And one has already been elected to the House leadership. So I'm very excited to see that for her. But I think the thing that's important to recognize, if you take it down to the local level in some parts of the country, we've said so many times on the show that local politics matter. Mm-hmm. What happens in our community and how those decisions are made and who's making those decisions matter. So in Texas, I'm excited that in San Antonio, we elected the first Japanese American county executive in the state's history. We've elected, we flipped several county commissioners' courts where they make decisions about your trash, right? They make decisions about your zoning and your property taxes, etc. For us, we flipped a few DA seats around the state, especially in suburban counties. That's important. And all of the new Democrats that we elected are either women or people of color. And so I'm excited about keeping a close enough House majority. We did not lose any of our Senate seats. We did not lose any of our incumbents. In Texas, we actually grew the caucus despite the redistricting. And so, for example, outside of Dallas and Collin County, we were excited that we elected the first Democrat to represent that county in 48 years. And so we flipped that seat. We are sending 2 Muslim Americans, the first 2 Muslims to serve in the legislature. And we're sending the 3 of the first openly LGBTQ Black people to the state house also as well. So I know that, the results for us and some other parts of the country at the state level was very disappointing to watch Beto O'Rourke not make it across and other candidates that we ran statewide. We also flipped the county court of appeals district for the state, which means that when someone needs to go to the court of appeals in the state, that means something. We have a lot of fraud cases going on right now in Texas. And so that was also important in how we invested in the judiciary. But what all this means is, to your point, Marilyn, that there are warning signs. What we are seeing, at least in Texas, is a push in this legislative session to make school board elections partisan. It's going to be one of its kind. We know that it's coming up. We're working on our strategies with our legislators now to fight that bill. We know what happens when, just as Brandon just said about the things he is preparing his children for. We know what happens when certain people who don't need to be on the school board, whether it's their ideology, their lack of experience, their lack of compassion for teachers and children. We know what happens when they make it to a place of power where they can make decisions. And it's going to negatively impact our students when you have more Republicans and Tea Party folks there. But the big piece that is important that I'm going to share that is a takeaway is, yes, you stop the red wave, but there's still a red thunder. And there are a lot of people, and I know we're going to talk about Georgia later, right? There still over 1 million people voted for Herschel Walker. We need to talk about that. There's still places in South Texas where we were able to hold the valley, because if anybody's been following the press for the past 2 years, it's been Democrats are losing ground with Latino voters. So every county in the Rio Grande Valley, we won, despite the Republicans outspending us 6-1 in those communities. So we're able to hold the line, but there's still a red thunder that we have to be mindful of, because the line is only going to hold for so long. And so now what does that mean? We have to take this opportunity to see 2 things. One, we're really going to see the strength of President Biden's bipartisan leadership, because we have a split Congress with the Senate in Democratic hands and the Republicans holding a slim majority in the House. We're really going to have to see how he works this to really move legislation, to move things forward, because we're still expecting results, right, from the administration, from the Congress. The second thing that we're seeing is we're only going to see more dark money invested in these elections. They saw how close they can get. And the more we're going to get drowned out means we get our message drowned out, which means our people who look like us on the screen, our other Black and brown people, going to go out and vote in 2024. So we're going to see what happens over the next couple of years, that we still are fighting for voting rights, right? There's still comprehensive immigration reform that needs to happen, right? These are bolder issues that people in the Democratic coalition are looking for. And still looking to, and while we went out in a pandemic and voted for President Biden, we're still got to see progress on those issues, student loan reform, different issues that people care about, in their homes and in their communities. And so we see now with President Biden's 50 years of government experience, how he navigates this as the president, and what that can mean for elections, both at the federal level in 2024 and also on local elections leading up to 2024. So those are my thoughts around about that. Yes, we held the line, but it's not enough to hold the line, because now we have to work with a split Congress where we know where the Republicans stand on a lot of these issues.
Well, we know that their stance on a lot of the issues is not about helping people. It's just about hate and bigotry and denying people rights. I wrote my notes, y'all. in the audience, you don't know this, we can do a private chat. So I'm writing notes so I can remember, because Jamar did a masterful job of just running down a lot of issues. I'm glad you brought up the Hispanic vote, that in the national news, you kept hearing Democrats are losing the Hispanic vote, and it did not go exactly the way they were predicting it. However, you are right. We held the line, and we must do more than hold the line, which means that's an investment. Candidates with charisma is just one part of the political puzzle. I think people get tied up into a Beto campaign. They get excited. That's the role that he ended up playing, generating excitement among certain demographics. You get them out to vote. It helps the coattails of your campaign. Even though you may lose, it helps to lower tickets. That's why it's so important to vote locally, because it brings attention to all of the ticket, if you will. But I think that speaks to the party really needs to educate people about the political campaigns, how they work, and how it's very much like a chess game. And yes, everybody wants to win. We want Beto to be governor. But sometimes in losing, you also are a winner, because he brought a lot of attention to Texas. Money poured in. That helps more folks on the ticket, the local, state, other races. I just want to throw that in, because I think I'm going to go to Brandon to talk more about South Carolina, to talk about the midterms, the South Carolina races. And that kind of speaks to a lot of what did not happen in South Carolina. Lack of charisma in the top of the ticket. We had some issues in South Carolina. Brandon, share your thoughts about the midterms.
I have a few, and excuse me, I was writing them down while Jamar was dropping all them gems.
Yeah, he was.
And I noticed, if y'all wondering why I have such a glow today, it's because it was my birthday a couple of days ago, so I'm still glowing. But
happy birthday!
Well, melanin just glows anyway, but happy birthday, okay?
That's right. Happy birthday.
So I want to go through my list here. So one, Jamar was saying that local elections are important, and they are, which I wanted to drop. I know we're going to do this eventually, but the special election in Georgetown for city council, December 27th, there's a special election. And why would it be 2 days after Christmas? It's because the Republicans who are trying to take over the city council want to make sure they do have this vote when people are paying the least amount of attention and the turnout for the election could be the lowest. So in a city like Georgetown that is 60+% Democrat, the minority of the population will be able to come and win another election and strip the rug from under us. So just want to remind people, if you live in Georgetown, know somebody who live in Georgetown, please remind them or yourself to go out and vote on or before December 27th, because early voting is already happening.
Right.
Then I'm just going to tick away at this. Before I get to South Carolina, I want to say that the Democrats, because back in July, nobody could tell me that there wasn't going to be, honestly, a red wave across this country. Nobody could tell me that there wasn't going to be. All signs showed us getting our tails handed to us across the board. And then, things started to shift. But I really believe that we have to give thanks to Mr. Donald Trump, because if he wasn't meddling in these elections, folks would have voted another way in large parts. And I don't think some of these seats that we held on to would have been held on if not but for the work of Donald Trump. So thank you, Donald Trump, for stopping that red wave from happening. And then also, I really think that in the same token of people expecting a red wave, there was a cohort that was cheering for the demise of Chairman Jamie Harrison in the DNC. And they were expecting him, to have his bags packed and be on his way out the door. But I think him, for not giving up and continuing to fight, and for doing his part in making sure that we save the Senate and put money on the ground in key races across this country. So just wanted to make sure Jamie got a little bit of flowers and some due respect in the process. Ain't nobody perfect, but he did what needed to be done in the time that we had. And now, thinking about South Carolina, it made me write down this quote. It is a quote about, and we're always talking about strategy in our conversation, especially here on the Gathering Place. You know, a lot of people confuse strategy with tactics. So I wanted to just say this. You know, tactical excellence without strategic understanding is like having a Ferrari without a steering wheel. The vehicle may be powerful, but it will never get you to where you need to go. And that sums up 2022 in South Carolina. You know, not only did we not have a strategy for this midterm election, we had top of the ticket candidates who I think we need to bring Jamar here to South Carolina to do a strategic planning training, or maybe even an organizing training for how you engage communities of color. But we also lacked tactical excellence in how our statewide candidates ran their campaigns. And I'm being, it might seem a little harsh, but it had to be realistic, because when you see what happened in November in South Carolina, when, you know, you have one candidate who's running for governor, focus very narrowly on one idea of a pathway to victory that has not been proven, because the last three folks who fit his exact same model tried to do the same thing and lost. You know, like, it is not, we can't say this anymore, that trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. No, we have to say the people who do the same things over and over again and expect a different result are fools. We got to call it how it is, and like the old folks say, put it where the goats can get it, right? Because if we keep this up, we're not at the ground floor just yet. We're not at the bottom of the barrel just yet. It can get worse here in South Carolina. This morning I was reading, because I'm in a South Carolina conservatives group on Facebook. So I like going through there and reading what they post. You know, you got to stay in the room. So, and their latest conversation is about how upset they are that South Carolina did not make the list of the top 10 most conservative states in the nation. And they were saying how we have the most liberal conservatives serving in leadership in our state house than any other state in the country, and just upset and just calling the roll of all the ways that Republican leadership has failed the conservatives of the state over and over again. And then, you know, they throwing some blame for Democrats doing stuff. And I'm just sitting there like, y'all are in complete control of South Carolina. Anything that you're upset about with with bills, with the process protocol, with the decisions that are made, you cannot blame one Democrat for it, because the Republicans are the first and last say of everything that happens in this state. So, you know, then they start talking about what they need to do to make this change. Another reason I like being in those rooms, because, you know, they just lay it all out and you get to understand what their mentality are. And their mentality is that we can go further and we can take more. And we have to understand that in this midterm election, because of our lack of strategic understanding, because of our lack of tactical execution, because of our lack of the ability to recruit candidates to run and have coattails and raise money and put money on the ground and have a coordinated campaign in this state, we lost races that we should not have lost. For instance, in the state house of South Carolina, We lost 55% of our total population of Black women in our state House of Representatives. 55% in one election year. You know, that study after study shows that when you have women in the room, the product becomes exponentially better, right? So what happens when you take women out of the room? What happens when you take Black women out of the room? What conversations do you think are going to be had, and what policies do you think are going to be moving forward with their voices being removed from the process altogether? Then we look in places like Dorchester County when these radical folks with Moms for Liberty take over a school board. In their very first meeting, what do? They fire the superintendent of education that has brought that school district from failing to moving into an excellent direction, right? All because he wouldn't agree with them on their CRT agenda and all their other agendas to strip and destroy public education. It can get worse. And we have to realize that if we're planning today for the election that's tomorrow, we're already losing. We have to plan today for the elections that are 2, 4, and 6 years from now so that we are ready. That's what this all means for South Carolina. And the questions that we're going to be answering on with this gathering place is, where do we go from here? And what does that look like? And we have to have those real conversations and be honest with ourselves and each other and call a spade a spade. You know, we cannot be those Democrats that tiptoe around the issue and tiptoe around people's feelings, because when we do that, we lose, and we continue to lose, and we're seeing it, and it's time out for it altogether.
Brandon, let me first applaud you for going to a conservative Facebook page. And they don't realize yet that you're there.
Nope.
Well, good for you. We're not gonna call it anything. Good for you. I applaud you. Yeah. I just applaud you. And I also applaud you because I couldn't take it. And I am actually on some Facebook pages that are not liberal or people of color, Black, oriented pages. And I got to kind of step away from that sometimes. It's kind of like the community pages, but the communities are very white. And in South Carolina, very white, very conservative, but they're not political. But I'll give you a good example of why it's so important that the Democrats need to get organized year round, be engaged in the communities because of the issues. After Hurricane Ian, I was in these Facebook pages, and people don't realize Hurricane Ian came in through Georgetown, probably about 5 miles from my house. The eye came through. It did incredible damage in Pawleys Island and Litchfield, which is on the beachfront, very white and conservative. But it also did incredible amount of damage in the rural areas, which are more Black, majority Black at this time. But the things I saw on those beachfront Facebook pages about, it's time for us to move inland now. So when you're talking about moving inland, it was talking about, let's go grab land, grab houses, or develop.
Yep.
But not once do they talk about the people who are already there.
Right.
And this is why it's important that we elect people who think about people, all people, and consequences of the actions, because they're going to have to change ordinances, the comprehensive plan that every county has to do. All of this impacts politics. All of this is political. And if we are not engaged, if we are not at the table of politics or civic engagement, we are going to be pushed out. We are going to be gentrified. We are going to lose land. We're going to lose income. And who knows where it's going to end. You are right to say we need to think 2, 4, 6, 8 years down the road when it comes to elections. But we actually need to think 10, 20 years when it comes to vision, strategy, community plans. We need to think 10 years down the road about the census. When the last census ended, we were already talking about the next census in 10 years because there will be a sea change in South Carolina. In South Carolina, the Republicans now have a supermajority in the next legislature. They no longer have to consult the What does that mean? They no longer have to consult the Democrats. You know, before you had to do a little consultation. Now it's like, what do we want? We're going to get it. So if you're telling us, Brandon, and these Facebook pages that you are in, and they're saying we're not conservative enough, we want to be in the top 10, that should be very scary to people. We're going to have some hurt in this state beyond of what we're already hurting. After Hurricane Ian, I had to drive around because I was helping people to get help from FEMA. FEMA finally came in about 2.5 weeks ago, more than 65 days after the hurricane. But to see the conditions people are living in, third world conditions in these United States. And they don't care about those people. All they care about is, I'm losing my beachfront home. Let me go inland and buy some more land. You know, this is why we need to vote. This is why it's so important that we need to be engaged. I see both of you shaking your heads, and I know we got a lot to go through, but go ahead, Jamar, just any
I mean, I think the biggest thing that I sit with in this conversation is how fear has really driven our politics. So in this case, fear of losing my beachfront home, so I need to go move. Or, you know, when you say, Brandon, you're in those conservative groups, we're not conservative enough. It's almost like a fear of them being left out of this broader movement that obviously is built to damage communities, that is built to provide opportunities only to certain individuals, you know, etc. And even in Texas, the biggest thing that came up that we got slammed on was crime, immigration, border security, and inflation. I mean, their Republicans spent like $50 million on TV ads. I mean, we still won because what y'all said in a lot of those communities, the organizing is what mattered. But even as a party, you know, I put out a memo. I shared it with y'all, and it's all public now, so I'm not saying anything out of turn. But, you know, and I said that Democrats can't put our heads in the sand anymore on some of these critical issues that they are now using, like the economy and immigration, where, you know, they've used these issues to divide, to create fear, to create angst, to, you know, anxiety, etc. In communities. And that's what we're seeing, because when they win elections, like y'all said, you get to a supermajority, they just snap, do what they want. And if you let the people who are in this Facebook group get to the Capitol to convince them to do worse, they will do worse because they will feel like their electoral future is on the line. That's why you see the Republicans going as far right off the scales now, you know, as possible. Thankfully, in a lot of states across the country, people voted against that. But the margins are still close, which means in a Georgia, in a Nevada, in a Arizona, where, yes, we won those Senate races with Raphael Warnock, Catherine Cortez Masto, Mark Kelly. Those are states that we've been investing in for years to build that infrastructure, and for them to win elections by 50,000 votes. You know, Catherine Cortez Masto won by 27,000. That should be alarming to people, because these are people that would be in control. You would have had an Adam Laxalt or a Dr. Oz or a Herschel Walker, who would have been in charge of trillions of dollars that they could have done damage. And they would literally do damage because they're evil and incompetent. And you can't put both together. And so that's what you're seeing in the Republican Party. And y'all, South Carolina, I mean, it's all over the country. That you're seeing, especially in these southern states, and I'll include Texas in that. And so we've got to be looking out for that. And as we not only campaign in elections, but, you know, to do the organizing work 365 all year, even in an off year, that's also what we've got to be thinking about as progressives, as Democrats, is how are we harnessing the issues and talking about that? Because I was very clear in a lot of my TV interviews, I would talk about the freedom to vote or the freedom to choose. They don't get to sit there and just have free reign to talk about freedom when they're the ones who are blocking people's freedoms. And so we've got to be able to, one, go on the offense and throw a punch, but also too, as you said, Brandon, call them on their stuff. And as the old folks will also say, is call a spade a spade. The spade is right there. And so we've got to stop trying to go around it and just start talking about it. And I think our voters want to see us do that. They want to see us campaign on positive things and proactive things, but they also want to see somebody who, I think we've said here before, they want to see someone who's going to fight for them. That means fighting the misinformation and disinformation that is out there, whether it's in these Facebook groups, Twitter, blogs, TV, because people spend all this money to put things on TV. They're doing it for a reason, because they want you to believe a thing. And so we've got to stand in who we are and what we believe and go out there and amplify it, so that there are people who are believing what we believe. They will show up. They will encourage other people to vote. I was in the grocery store a few weeks before the election, and I had my Texas Democrat shirt. We just finished canvassing, and this Hispanic woman walked up to me and tapped me on the shoulder. I love what you're doing. Stop whispering. Because let me tell you, the Republicans not whispering. And that's why they have all this hoopla and everything going on. It's not just Donald Trump. It's all of them that handled this election, because technically there's a lot of places where you said they should have won. Some of their own extremism even hurt them. But we can't sit back as Democrats and rely on their extremism to hurt them, because then what does that mean for us in the long term? Because at some point, when people have given you the keys to govern, you still have to govern.
It's the misinformation thing, but it's also what you just said. We've got to shout what we have accomplished. Biden has accomplished a lot. So that's one level. But we got to let people know. We don't need to whisper it. We got every house should be at Thanksgiving should have been talking about Inflation Reduction Act and the billions that's being poured in to green renewable energy and how it's going to impact folks. Electric vehicles. It literally is impacting the work that I do. It does, it's going to impact our households with jobs and investments in communities. But there's also another side of that, of pointing out that misinformation. For example, inflation. November prices, after the election, prices dropped drastically, which tells you it was not inflation. It was price gouging. Mm-hmm. Somebody democratically right now needs to be talking about that and shouting it, either on social media or going on Sunday talk shows and say, look, we were telling you with price gouging. Here's the proof. It literally, these companies, these corporations were price gouging. It was not inflation, because inflation doesn't work like that. That immediately after the election, prices start dropping. So you see the fix was in, but if you don't tell people,
they get caught in the fix.
Thank you. They're just going to listen to who fills that gap. And the Republicans, as you said, Jamar, they're not whispering, they're shouting everything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I know Brandon's got something to say.
No, you touched on it. You're absolutely right. It reminded me of a conversation that Tom Steyer had during the primary when he was trying to support President Obama's push for renewable energy. And he went to a former friend of his in Texas who runs this big energy company. And Tom was like, with the snap of a finger, this guy's company could change, our 25%, a quarter of our energy footprint in the country, because his company is just that big. But because he agreed with everything Tom was saying until he found out that it would benefit President Obama politically. So he decided not to do it and actually to push in the opposite direction, right? And I wonder to this day what that guy's doing. Is he willing to do something now that, when Donald Trump was in office, or is he willing to do it now that Joe Biden is in office? Because 2 days, even where I live at, 2 days after the election, gas prices dropped 15 cents over here in our community. And now, it is night and day from where it was. And that's not because of any legislation. That's because of the will to do it. And we just have to be mindful and be proud. And I'll say this and I'll shut up. We got stuck in this era of when they go low, we go high. And they went low and was knocking us out at the ankles. So now when they go low, we got to be prepared to kick them in the face. And because we just can't play soft, we can't play nice any longer. We got to take this fight to them because we're losing people left and right.
Yeah, people are really dying over this, cutting us off at the ankles between the response to COVID. Millions of people died. Our education system, they're attacking that. We've got to put real faces on the consequences. And I think sometimes we get too much in the wonkiness of it and not really relating it to real people dying, real people paying high healthcare costs, real people putting off treatment because of healthcare costs. And it could go on and on and on. The fight with the living wages needs to be really, a human face needs to be put on it, and we need to drill it time and time again. And we keep missing opportunities. So we're going to move on. We want just a few words about the United States Georgia runoff and Walker candidacy. I just want to say this quickly to open the conversation. After Walker lost to Warnock, thank you, we're grateful for that. It's then when I saw some Black folks start posting about, this campaign just really insulted the Republicans, insulted the Black voter with this candidacy. And my thought was, that's true. I don't live in Georgia, so I didn't do a lot of posting about Georgia. That's true. But why didn't they post about it before the election? We need to call it what it is. And I think we do in the Black community have this thing of, we know what's wrong is wrong, and what Walker did, terrible candidate. Cannot save that candidacy. But we don't call it what it is because we want to protect our community. We don't want to embarrass the community. Well, the embarrassment was the candidacy. So we need to call it for what it is. And I think that's something in politics for Black folks, we have to get over, because we have to take responsibility too. In our engagement in making sure that we all vote and educating our community of why we should vote. And that's part of that education. They say, yeah, he was an embarrassment. And this is why he was an embarrassment. And this is why you need to come out and vote against him. But I say that now, I'm saying, thank you, Georgia, for voting. Thank you, Georgia, for voting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, y'all know the saying that goes, all skin folk ain't kin folk. Y'all know the saying. I mean, that's what it is. And we have to just accept it for what it is, right? And I think we've had this thing that we're supposed to not, criticize another Black person who may be doing wrong. Don't embarrass, like you said, Marilyn, the person. And we lose in that at the end of the day, because not only is the insult Herschel Walker, running, I mean, he should be appalled that he let himself be used that way. At the end of the day, because that is what the Republicans thought Black people were. You just get up there and just blabble on some stuff, and they think we're not intelligent. We can't think critically. We can't think ahead. We can't think for ourselves. And they showed their hand. So when you have the Tim Scotts of the world and the Mia Loves of the world and the Ben Carsons of the world who align with that, you have to sit back and wonder, what do these people think not only of themselves, but what do these people think, of our particular communities? Because, listen, I posted on social media, look, Texas don't want Herschel Walker either. And people got on me about it. They're like, how could you say that? Aren't you Black ED? Da, da, da. I was like, well, I'm not a Republican. Never will be, Black or not. But at the end of the day, if wrong is wrong, stupid is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And embarrassment is an embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
You just happen to be Black and I'm Black. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to call things to the carpet. And so I hope that our community will look to the future on either party. When there is a Black nominee, that we will look at that person, not just because they're Black. Representation matters. Absolutely. But competence matters, compassion matters, integrity matters. And Herschel Walker showed every step of that campaign he had none of those values. And the fact that there are still Black people who voted for him, that we need to talk about that. But at the end of the day, he didn't show it. And if these are the things I believe, he just happens to be Black. And it's not about tearing down the community. It's about calling out a person for not being a good leader, for not being a good candidate, and not needing to be the person. Herschel Walker don't even need to run for student council president, if you ask me. You know, or dog catching, if you ask me. But the Republicans thought, oh, we could peel off black voters from Warnock if we put this black man who played sports, because they also only think that we're good enough to play sports and run up and down a field for them, you know, to go and make money. So it shows you all of that. And so our community, we've got to be able to push back and start saying, this is who we are. This is what I believe. This is what I look for in a candidate, right, that I'm voting for. And you don't have a right to just throw some black person on the ballot and think that I'm going to throw my vote away. And that's what they expected.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, this was the first time I've had folks working on the ground in Georgia, and I wasn't there physically knocking on doors with them. It felt really weird. But just, you know, you got to do something different every now and again. So we had folks in Augusta. We had folks over in Appling, Georgia, and along the Low Country waterfront area to the Florida border. And we were asking qualitative questions at the doors because we focused on black voters that did not go out and vote the first time, right? And a lot of folks were saying, oh, I'm just over. Can we just get a break from politics? Like, this stuff is so nasty. You know, we were hearing that. We were hearing from some of the grass tops in these areas that said, well, you know, I helped the last time he ran, but they didn't come and ask me for my help this time. So me and my folks are staying home. Like, you know, to our own demise. Because what would have happened if the results would have went a different way? And this is, I feel like, and I think both y'all touched on this about our own accountability to one another in these elections, because there's so much more than a personality contest or one election. It's about the future of our community and how these positions impact when we get what we get and how we get it and how much we get it. So that was crazy. But Marilyn, I think you got the graphic. I wanted to share some of the numbers, demographic numbers.
I do. Let me bring that up. Thank you for reminding me.
Because
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jamar.
And while you were pulling up the numbers, I was going to say, when you said to the point about accountability, think about what that means as people who are considered whether regular voters or community leaders to say, oh, well, they didn't ask me to do something. Why do you have to wait to be asked to do something, right? Because you want to be seen as a leader in and out of the election, but you only want to be a leader when I'm asked or I'm, you know, summoned or, you know, whatever. And so we've got to start thinking about that as a people. Nobody's saying get trampled on and be taken advantage of. No one's saying that. Right. But at the end of the day, why are you waiting to be asked when, if you care about your community, if you care about showing up as a leader in your community, why are you waiting on Warnock's campaign to call you and ask you? You just do it. Because at the end of the day, you should know what's at stake for your community. Herschel Walker, come on. I'm trying to, come on. The man is not bright. And it certainly would not have helped y'all at all. And so I just wanted to drill down on when we say accountability, it also means that we have to be accountable to self. If I'm going to be a leader in my community, I'm going to be a leader whether I'm asked or not. So I just wanted to add that.
That's 100% true. You know, I keep hearing the words of that pastor that said, we don't need a Walker. You know, it's just, he laid it out so plain. But at the end of the day, you know, the numbers speak for themselves, and the Republican Party has been positioning themselves as the party of values, the party of principle, the party of patriots, so on and so forth, right? Red-blooded American citizens and who are Christian are Republicans. That's what they want us to believe. But then you have a candidate like Herschel Walker, where it is proven over and over and over again that he is the contradiction to everything you say you stand for. And he's running against this pastor who actually lives out and serves out the things that you say you stand for, but yet you run to the polls to vote for Herschel Walker regardless. You put your principles to the side, you put your values to the side, you put your Christianity to the side, because what's more important to you than your principles? And that's power. And at the end of the day, that is hypocritical. And looking at this this race and the turnout in this race, you know, it shows how the Republicans are really lying to themselves and everyone else every time they open up their mouth to talk about principles and values. You got 71% of white men, 68% of white women who voted for Herschel Walker, for someone who paid for abortions, at one time say he supported abortions with no exceptions, and now your past shows that you act a different way. Like, that is the epitome of the Republican Party. They say one thing in public while they're doing something else in private, right? Going down, you know, the black vote is just such a solid base for the Democrats, but you'll look at the black men, 12% of them voted for Herschel Walker, and there will be folks who say, what's wrong with black men? You know, what, you want 100% of us to vote, you know, one way, to think one way? But we have to ask ourselves, really, where are we missing the boat with the section of our black men, and even that section of black men that voted that still don't feel heard, right? And black population altogether. You know, we keep giving our vote in hopes that we get something tangible in return. But this younger demographic, this younger black voter, they're saying, I won't vote for you, or I won't vote for at all until I start seeing tangible results come, because otherwise it's not showing that my vote is counting. And now, you know, you go down to the Hispanic and Latin vote and see how they really voted heavily for the Democrat in this race, and show that we're not losing support within the Hispanic and Latin population the way that some folks want us to believe. But we also have to make sure with every minority group, and we'll call them minority right now, because you start adding us up together with our real strength, we're creeping towards a majority. But we have to start answering the questions. What are we getting in return? And I'll stop right there, but I wanted to see what y'all thought about these numbers as they came in.
So I agree with you regarding the Latino vote. I look at it as in we still have opportunity to grow that, but I think and I'm generalizing, they tend to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to issues like abortion. Many of them are Catholic, not all, and their Catholicism tends to be on the conservative side. But we need to start talking about human rights with them, and economic opportunity. And bottom line, they're going to want to see results also. I think with black men, the black male vote, and I'm going to take a bigger picture, bird's eye view of this right now, that 12% represents, I'll start here. Black folks, we tend to create our community and look at it as a monolith, that we all worship the same, we all like the same music, and we're not. The very first thing we are human, with all of the positives and negatives of being human and all the fallibles of being human. Then we're black. In our case, our black leads when we enter the room because we have a political system that was created, an economic system that was created to make us the other so that the white folks could benefit. You know, Professor Eddie Goud, I bet both of you, I'm assuming, know him. see, I think he's at Princeton. One of his famous quotes is, the greatest sin of America is not slavery. It's not the genocide of the Native Americans. The greatest sin is that white people believe they're better than everybody else. And that gets into your mind. And as a human, it gets into your mind. And I think as Black folks, we have to recognize our humanity, that we're human before we're Black, to understand that need we have to not have this burden of being Black anymore. So you have some white males who buy into the patriarchy, who buy into that white Christian evangelism, and they want women to be in their place. They want to be at the top of the mountain. I think that's what attracts them to these Republicans, that they're selling them this snake oil of, you could be at the top of the mountain if you associate with us. That's why they're voting Republican. And that's a little esoteric to understand, but I think that's at the root of it. And from there, it manifests itself in voting patterns. It manifests itself in policy and issues and what they buy into. I think to counteract that, you've already given us the answer, Brandon. You've got to show results. You got to show that they could go get paid, good paying jobs, they could get educated, lessen the burden of being Black. That's just my thoughts regarding that.
A couple of things I'll share, and I agree with y'all on all of the points. I always look at every poll and, like, to your point about the patriarchy and how that's been established and how different communities are either a part of it or look at it. You look at this white woman number again, because just a few months ago, everybody was in the streets about this Dobbs decision and everything that happened. And when you had a chance to take action, you did not. You did not stand with other candidates or other communities. I always got to call that out. The other piece that I found particularly interesting in Texas is when we increased our Black male number to 88% in that vein, because the same thing you said, Marilyn. We started talking about jobs and opportunities. We took Beto to the barbershops. Black barbers were giving Beto a haircut. And people were like, why is he doing that? Da, da, da. Not just for show, but here's this man who's running for governor that is going to be at the purse strings of the state in terms of providing opportunities. And we took Beto in the churches and in the barbershops, in the food markets on Saturday morning, in different things of that nature. Because at the end of the day, people have to see you. People have to know you see them. And also people have to know that you see results, ultimately at the end of the day. And for us, it was important to take Beto there because he needs to see for himself how these businesses function and operate different. So when they go out for state funding and they go out for other educational, economic opportunities, they're treated different because they operate different. And you as the governor or the potential governor need to see that. And that's where we create a lot of the disparities. But I will name this thing that we saw as a trend in Texas. More Black women voted against Beto than Black men, what we saw. So for the first time, we saw about 10% of Black women vote for Greg Abbott. And the other piece that we also have to start talking about broadly as a party is, to your point, Marilyn, what does it mean about economic opportunities? But what we have focused on is capitalism and how Black men can make more money. We have to be careful to not leave Black women out of the conversation because we could lose those votes as well. And so I think that we've got to figure out a way to, I don't want to say find a balance because that's not the right line of words that I want to use. But at the end of the day, how do we uplift the whole community? Because yes, we made those investments, right? We've had this conversation on this show. We need to really engage Black men more, but we have to not forget to engage Black women. And so we saw while the Black number went up, our Black women number went down, and so that's a learning lesson, I think, that we're seeing also here, not only in Georgia, but in Texas. We've got to see that across the country. And so they've got to see themselves represented and doing some of that. And so I just want to name that as a trend that I saw, at least. And it doesn't happen everywhere. But a trend that I saw, also as well is in how we uplift our Black men. We've got to make sure that we uplift Black women too, and it's not either or. It's got to be an and, to make sure that we can maximize the strength of the Black vote, and make sure that we are voting for the best candidates that are going to move the critical policy pieces forward. Because as you said, Marilyn, right, we've got to start thinking in policy 20, 30, 40 years. It's down the line. It's not about just tomorrow. It's about how do I set my community up for success for the next generation of folks that will be running businesses or, leading in other ways, also as well. I think the last piece that's important, and I don't know what the breakdown here is by AAPI, but we've been being very mindful about language barriers. And that has been a huge consideration for me as the executive director. Is we just can't assume all Black people speak English. We just can't assume all, Latino voters don't speak English, right? And then for us, the AAPI vote mattered a lot. And I don't know what that breakdown is for Georgia. But, for me, that is also something we've got to think about. How do we also engage people on their turf? Right. And the problem is we come in and we create all these slogans and these big things, and then we expect people to connect to that. And we've got to be more mindful of when we are working and engaging and organizing in these communities, how are we meeting them where they are in their turf? And we've gotten a lot of feedback about that. Not sure, about other folks, but I think we've got to be conscious of that also as well. So I think those are a couple of thoughts that I had, not only just for this, but other things that I was thinking in general.
Jamar, not this cycle, but in 2020, I remember seeing a TV segment about a Pacific Islander, AAPI candidate in Texas. And the focus was on how he had at least 12 to 13 different languages in his campaign materials. And I never followed up to see if he won, and I can't remember his name. Does that recall anything for you?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think who it could be. We've got a couple now elected officials
Okay.
that are, which is.
But good. I thought it was, speaking of the language thing, I thought that was so good that he was very intentional and deliberate with that. And we forget, yes, we can under Obama was si se puede, in Spanish. And that really caught on. It can be done. And I think it shows people that I see you. In the Black community, I see you. I would like to see the Black female breakdown regarding the Beto vote by age. Do you all have those numbers?
Yeah, we're still working through some of the data on the age stuff, but once I have it, happy to think through. Yeah, because this is the first time that we saw a Republican get almost double digits.
I
in Texas.
Notice with the abortion issue, Black women were quiet my age. One way or the other. Now my age, and I'm gonna say because it's important, 57. I am pro-abortion. I'm more liberal. But I actually don't think Black people are conservative. You hear that frame? I don't think we're conservative because we couldn't be conservative. We're constantly fighting for voting rights. We're actually, I think, progressives, but people buy into this mantra of Blacks are conservative, which basically, by Republican definition, makes us biased. That's because they're conservative. It's bias. And I don't think Black people are that, but we don't educate enough. We don't drill down enough to make us understand that we're progressive. And I think the age thing came into play where younger Black women were that's who you saw at abortion protests and stuff, much more out with pro-abortion, pro-choice. With the olders, we're still coming from that church background. And the younger ones don't go to churches often either. Someone like me, I'm not gonna tell you about church, but anyway.
I think an important point too is outside of the church piece. When you say younger Black women, at least it's been my understanding in conversations, they also experience knowing that those rights were constitutional. Right? They came up in a world where it was a right.
They took it for granted. Then all of a sudden, it was
an abortion, right? Yeah. Whereas like my mom's generation, that stuff happened while she was growing up. versus growing up in that environment. And so that could potentially be, I can't answer the question. I'm not a Black woman,
I
but
know.
from conversations that I've had, that's where I've heard some of it is church and just how we were raised and grew up. But it's also like, what was the political standard in which you were growing up and what you became accustomed to? And so it's almost like for younger Black women, what they were saying is, we've always grown up talking about how Black people have had to fight to hold on to our rights. And now I am actually experiencing what it means to lose a right in this generation, in this time, which is different than building the rights of previous generations. We're sitting as the generation that are sitting there and literally losing the right.
Yeah.
And so that fight might be a little bit different. That's just conversations I've had, but happy to.
I think age does come into play. The issue. I would love to hear more about it when you guys flesh out those numbers, because I think overall that is actually where the Democratic Party does not need to take granted the Black woman vote, that Black female vote, because it's that cultural thing, but it's very, very nuanced, and we're not going to say, my age is not going to run out and say I'm pro-abortion. They're going to be, I'm pro-choice. They're going to be quiet about it, but they're going to still go vote. But it's something there that's very nuanced that the Democratic Party needs to have some conversations about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So our last two things. South Carolina first in the nation primary. Brandon, I'm gonna let you take that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You the man.
but also I know we kind of differ a little bit on this in our stance about it. And I'll go back to one thing. So in that top 10 list of the most conservative states in the country, Iowa was like number 6 or 7 on that list, right? As one of the most conservative states in the country. And when you think about this opportunity for changing the schedule and the map for the Democratic primary, it also changes the trajectory for who makes it for our general election as well. So there's a couple things that we can flesh out. Those states that are in the primary process, the early states that are in the primary process, is it a good investment for the general, and or is it a good investment for the future of the party and how the party includes the voices of the people? And I think that this puts more power into the hands of people of color. Joe Biden people say that South Carolina gave him the presidency. Well, at that time, we were the 4th primary, or 4th in the list of primaries and caucuses. But us being number 1 means that not only do we set the tone, but it changes the strategy for the primary, but it also not just uplifts the voices of predominantly Black folks, but it upgrades our opportunity for Black vendors, Black consultants, Black community leaders, Black organizations, to be involved at a more intimate level in the state, but also take a more broader stance with the entire process itself. So overall, I think that is a good thing. I'm a little biased being here in South Carolina, and I'm excited about it. I remember John Delaney camping out in Iowa for 2 years, getting ready for that primary election. That didn't help him none, but
John Delaney, who?
But I think about what happened in the primary when Tom Steyer went to Hampton County to the burning trash heap that had been burning and putting arsenic in the air for over 2 years, and no one covered it. No one pushed for the company to change it. But once a presidential candidate came to town And then that burning trash heap was in the Washington Post and the New York Times and on the AP's wire. Within 3 months, the trash heap was gone, you know? So sunlight is the best sanitation. And I think it helps on a number of different levels if we're number one, personally and selfishly for South Carolina. But I'll step back and let y'all share your thoughts.
Well, so Texas, we landed on Super Tuesday. So yeah, we were trying to be first, okay. But
everybody ain't able. Everybody, but it's okay.
But I'm from South Carolina, so listen, I get to still take pride, okay. I grew up in Charleston, let's let the viewers know, okay. I grew up in Charleston, educated in South Carolina, all the way through college. So let's let the record reflect now. And I had mixed feelings, back and forth. I can see the points that you make, right? I think that what I want to name is that as candidates look to invest in South Carolina, you need a state party and you need leaders in the state that are actually going to hold people accountable to said strategy that you laid out. Also as well, it's not about just, more consultants, more media buys, more attention on issues that impact Black people in South Carolina. It's about how do you set this up in a way to where the primary is not the big rave and rant. And so for 9 months to a year before February 2024, everybody's talking about South Carolina. And then the day after, no one is talking about South Carolina. And so the concern I think that people have is, yes, I would love to hear from Black voters, especially in the primary. We've been the backbone of the party. So that's great to pick a state where there's a heavy concentration of African-American voters where we can have that say much earlier in the process. We just don't want to leave the wiggle room for any presidential campaign, win, lose, or draw in South Carolina, to say not only to Black voters in South Carolina, but to Black voters throughout the rest of the primary process. Oh, I didn't win South Carolina. Oh, I dumped money into South Carolina, so I don't need to do other things. I don't need to engage in other ways. And so for me, it's within the campaigns, within the state party, within whether elected officials, other delegates, DNC members, etc. How are we building out this thing in a way to maximize the voices of Black voters, maximize economic opportunities, professional development opportunities for Black people, but to also not just be the drop in the bucket. And that is the balance you got to find, because I don't want people running around and saying, well, I spent $10 million in South Carolina, so, the Black voters need to vote for me, in the other states, because shortly after South Carolina is Georgia. After that will be North Carolina. After that will be Texas, because you're going to have Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi. All of us are the same day. And Texas has the highest amount of Black voters in the country. And so South Carolina being intentional and being strategic of holding presidential candidates accountable for investing in Black voters, not only in the state up to the primary, after the primary, and how does that catapult into investments across the Black vote across the other states? Because even after the South Carolina primary, just as I outlined, you're going to have 7-8 states that have heavy Black concentration, including Texas, that's right behind it also as well. So I'm not against it. I just want to make sure as Black people, we don't get caught up in it. And we maximize it financially, economically, and politically. And so that's my call to action, not being a leader in the South Carolina Democratic Party at this current juncture, right? But, I hope that Black people will start thinking about what does this mean for the state? What does this mean for professional development and economic development? But what does this also mean in the strength of the Black vote across the country to make sure that we choose the best nominee that we want going forward to compete in the general election? So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and for the record, you're always going to be my vice chair, Jamar.
You know what's so crazy? It's been over a decade.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm getting older.
Keep on living. That's all. Go ahead, Mary.
All I have to say about the primaries is what Jamar said. You know, I'm a big proponent of primaries because I think the competition makes for better candidates and ultimately for better elected officials. And Jamar wrapped it up very well for me. So we hope for the best. Let's wrap this up, y'all. We said 35 minutes, and we have obviously surpassed that. But great discussion. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We are pre-recorded, but if you want to drop your comments, please do. I'll make sure that I'm here and I can answer comments and stuff and everything. But where do we go from here? Any thoughts, just in general? Where do we go from here? Brandon, we'll start with you.
Learning the definition and the difference between tactics and strategies. I think if we start there, we can go anywhere.
Yeah. I'll ditto that. And I hope that, to be quite honest with you, in this current moment, what I am learning, because as somebody who works a lot and it sits in a role that is 24 hours a day, people call you all the time. I challenge people to rest a little bit. I think we don't talk about that enough. I think, yes, we need to organize around the clock as much as we can and move resources. I'm not saying don't organize, but if we all run ourselves into the ground, then what good are we to each other, right? What good are we to the movement? So I hope that people will actually take this holiday time to actually rest and recharge. So that, to your point, Brandon, when we're planning strategies and tactics and actions, we're actually doing it with as clear of a mind as possible. We have been challenged, especially as young people, people of color, women, etc., to always be in the fight. You're always in the fight, and you don't have time to recharge. You don't have time to think ahead because you're always in a fight. And so I think that I would encourage us during this holiday season to take advantage of the opportunity to be able to do that. What I'll say is that's important to your point, Marilyn, about earlier that you said about we need results and actions. Two critical things that are happening in the country. One, Congress returns in early January. Most state legislatures start early to mid-January, somewhere in there. A couple states start in February. But, get engaged in your legislative session. This is where you build the results. I think, we just say we need to just get ready for the next election. No, we need to be intentional about how do we go to Congress? How do we go to our state legislatures and city councils? What are the results that we want? And while those bodies are in session, they're advocating and fighting for the results we want. Or in some cases, like Texas, we might be fighting some things along the way. And so I think that those are the things that we need to be doing. I think we're so caught up in how do we get to this community? How do we line up the primary? How do we do all those things? Fine. And those things need to happen. But this is the time for us to build our message and build our case as to why we either need to be reelected or need to be elected to a thing in the 23 elections and in the 24 elections also as well. So I hope that we take some time to actually organize to govern and not just organize for the next election.
Segueing from what you said, Jamar, I think if we don't take rest, we also tend to get lazy and we don't realize it. We just, when you're tired, you tend to go to, let me just check off the box. Let me just get it done. And we're not really thinking it through. And so it leads me to this point that I wanted to make. Because of lazy thinking, we need to really retire the phrase, not voting in their best interest. When we're talking, whether it's white females or black males, they are voting in their interest. That's what when we say they're not voting in their best interest, what we're really saying is they're not voting the way I want them to vote, based on what I believe the issues are. So we're not meeting people where they are when we do that. When we say to white women who are voting Republicans, oh, you're not voting in your best interest, they sure are voting in their best interest. Their best interest is to uphold their Republican husbands' household lifestyle, because that's who's providing that household and lifestyle for them. So we, as more progressive folks, liberals, Democrats, whatever term we want to use, have to get rid of that lazy thinking and approach people where they are. And quite frankly, we might need to leave some of those folks in the corner and go get those folks who are independents or who are registered to vote and they don't vote, because we're not really paying attention to them. What are their interests and how can we address them and get them out? Because at this point, there are more people voting who are registered to vote who are not voting, in particular in South Carolina. If we could get them to vote, we could turn this whole state around. But we keep chasing after those folks who their interests are not for us. That's why Brandon can go to a conservative Facebook page and they say, we're not conservative enough. There's no way we're going to ever win that vote over. So we need to stop trying and make the investment in those independent voters or those those registered voters who do not vote. That's where we need to get rid of that lazy thinking and get some rest, Jamar, and then come back with a new way of approaching these issues.
I agree with it all. Y'all about to make me go take a nap.
And we can't do that because we got places to be.
We got people to see. But
yeah, I got one more thing, Brandon, before you leave. Let me go ahead and pull it up. Let me see if I could get it. All right. Can you tell me happy birthday? Can you see it?
I can see it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Let me slide that in.
No, I'll see you. We got a shindig tonight, so I'm excited about it and letting people know to bring their mask, and there'll be temperature checks at the door because 'tis the season and don't want to be sick. So I'm just excited and just want to remind everybody who's watching, if you know someone in Georgetown, remind them to vote on or before December 27th in this special election. There's no reason in the world that Republicans should be winning these seats, especially in 60% Democratic performing cities. So we got to maintain this seat. So Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Brandon. I'll see you later. And also, if you're home for the holidays in Georgetown from college and you're registered to vote Georgetown, you can vote. Go ahead and vote early before Christmas, especially if you're home now. Jamar, any final words?
No, it's always good to be on with y'all. I hope that everyone watching, like I said, gets lots of rest, has a happy and merry holiday season, and look forward to being in the fight again in the new year.
Very good. Thanks, y'all, for joining me. As always, it's been a minute. We've been really busy, but this was a good one. We had to catch up, obviously. And I guess I'll see you guys on A Gathering Place Politics Talks in 2023, next year.
Yep, we can keep it going.
Very good. Be careful out there, Jamar. Sorry we're not going to see you, but
I know.
We'll see you later.
I'll be in Charleston next Friday, so if y'all are around, let's get together.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Okay.
Brandon, be careful. I'll see you later. All right, everybody. And that's Politics Talks, A Gathering Place. So happy to have everybody join us today. We went longer than we thought we were, but that's all right. And I just want to end it with happy holidays from A Gathering Place, and in particular, Jamar Brown and Brandon Upson. On their behalf, I want to wish you happy holidays and may all your dreams and wishes come true. We'll see you in 2023.